at the same time as responders are appearing on the scene. So what we're starting to see is this possibility of what we call the lean forward effect, where different levels of government are now getting a much more rapid heads up that they may be asked to provide some assistance. We don't know what that explosion was. We don't know if it was accidental or terrorist based. So the key thing is here that instantaneous transmission of information to all levels at the same time. Another observation we've been making recently, and particularly again with the Government Operations Center, who are implementing MESAs across 5 federal departments, and struggling a little bit with these long tried and true protocols of how the hierarchy of the cascade of information needs to work its way up in any one department and across and then down again. And what we're finding is that this rapid sharing of situational awareness is happening while not affecting the protocols. We're actually seeing that despite the fact that all are aware at the same time, there still is the, maybe it's through behavior and through training, the tendency to follow the normal protocols of moving the sit reps up the echelons of various levels of government and across as per the normal protocols. Will that change over time? We don't know. It's actually quite an interesting sociology type experiment to look at whether we need to maintain some of these flows now that the information is available to all simultaneously. Certainly our experience in the last few months is that, again, this is preliminary, we're talking experience of less than a year, is that the operators still want to do it the old way in terms of chain of command reporting. So now to a few screenshots of what MESAs actually looks like. First of all, the first thing a novice will say when he pulls up the MESAs feed is, wow, that's too much information, it's just garbage, I can't look at all that. And particularly if you look at too large a scale. If you look at the map of Canada, this was a while back, actually last summer, when Manitoba was having flooding. So it was if you see Manitoba, it's practically wall-to-wall road closures. Ontario was experiencing wildfires. But the key thing is you're not going to do that. If you're in the Federal Ops Center in Ottawa, you're probably going to turn down the filter on road closures to maybe the massive, major highway, multiple car backups kind of thing, or maybe a car-related incident in an embassy area or something like that. And you can filter this right down to what you need to see. So the big picture, the national view, will show things like all the weather feeds, by the way, that we receive. In fact, every feed that goes into MESAs only goes in because it's achieved a certain threshold where people need to pay attention. We don't put the sunny day in Ottawa feed in there. We put the hurricane alert or the tornado alert in Ottawa. So we have a threshold, and that's defined by the operators that have organized the implementation of the feeds. When there's a cluster of feeds, the system just puts, say, a number, so it tells you that you need to drill in to look at what the detail is. The provincial view will, again, just show a more scaled-up view of what's happening in the province, in this case, New Brunswick. When you hover over a particular alert, if it's an Environment Canada weather alert, you'll actually get the polygon pop up that shows the region that's affected. Very, very useful thing to be able to do with flood polygons. Now we're in discussion with the Mapping Information Branch at NRCan to implement flood polygons of various forecasted levels of flooding that are predicted in their prediction models. The community picture, you can drill right down the street. In fact, very interestingly, we've had a discussion with Dorval Airport and Pearson Airport, and even the precinct at the Parliament buildings, who are saying, can we use MESAs in a set of buildings? Well, absolutely you can. There's no reason you can't. In fact, we have what we're calling precinct MESAs project to look at some of the technologies to get the accuracy you'd need if you're inside a building or inside an airport where you want to show location of incidents in that sort of scale. In the spring of 2011, we had the unique opportunity to test MESAs in what has been declared as the 300-year flood. The emergency managers of Brandon, Manitoba called us in and asked if we could bring in MESAs right in the midst of the peak of the flood. It was quite remarkable for an operator to want anyone to come in with a new tool while things were getting quite ugly. So imagine that during that peak, with a vast amount of flooding that was occurring, we found stakeholders were able to, within 1 hour, take the 1 hour webinar from Ottawa, and we trained several communities, immediately through their home laptops start to populate the extent of flooding that was happening in their surrounding community. What was really interesting is because the Canadian forces were being deployed into the region, the Canadian forces were also able to look at the MESAs feeds. They were able to identify sandbagging operations and send troops to support the community volunteers that were working away at building their dikes. Another neat development, I think we'll see more of this, is this emergent behavior where people were starting to use MESAs for things we hadn't thought about. There was one incident where a work crew were handing over shifts and finding that by putting the MESAs note for the next crew coming up, there was very useful information that that could be made available. This one here is an actual excerpt where one work crew noted that please don't drain the breach to that wall. It's actually providing back pressure to hold the dike wall up. So they added that note onto the CAT message as a little marker to make sure the next crew coming in were aware of it. I'll start to go a little quicker as I'm getting down to the last 10 minutes here. These are the slides, the companies, so to speak, that have developed MESA's interfaces, and this has all happened in the last 6 to 9 months. I think there's about 8 companies there. And finally, a key aspect is that we don't impose any particular map. MESAS will work with Bing or Google. It'll work with almost any map system you want. If you don't have a map system, we link in the Natural Resources Canada mapping system, Toporama. We work very closely with Natural Resources Canada Mapping Information Branch and are in a project that's going to provide a whole bunch of layers of critical infrastructure, pipelines, hydro, rail, anything that emergency managers will conceivably want to see will become available to the MESAS environment. I think what I'm going to do in the interest of time is skip through this earthquake scenario very quickly. This is just to illustrate how it would unfold, say if an earthquake were to happen in BC. But I'll just maybe walk through here. The earthquake alert is automatically issued by Natural Resources Canada. As I mentioned earlier, we don't go through a website for many of our authoritative feeds. They come in directly from the source, so there's no possibility of crashing a website as will occur to the public who go to the website and try to get information. So the alerts start to appear on the map. The responders respond. Some of the landslides get reported. They all appear on the map according to the type of event that they have. This is an Esri viewer, and the Esri viewer, Esri booth is outside. You can see how they do it. It's a little bit different for every tool, but if you click on any of these icons, you can get quite a good amount of information. And as I mentioned earlier, you can attach, and what we actually do encourage is source agencies that provide information to provide the link directly to their source, their website, or whatever the source of information was, so the user can drill back to where that information is coming from. So we're now 7 months since we initiated the national capability, and we have approximately 200 agencies actively registered and exploring the concept of use for MESAS that suits their own requirements. All federal op centers are coming on board through a SharePoint portal that will have a MESAS module embedded. Every op center on their homepage will have that map of Canada that's fed through MESAS. In fact, we're developing the SharePoint module so that it's an open source widget that anybody is able to download that has SharePoint. It's amazing how many op centers have started to jump over into SharePoint, and I think some of the companies going bankrupt has been part of the catalyst for that happening quite sadly. All provinces and northern territories have accounts and are in various stages of implementation. Our general advice for all these agencies that have been pouring in is that our capability is operational, but your capability is not until you've developed your own SOP. So what we encourage them to do is draft the SOP for who can publish what in your agency, exercise with it, go back, revise it, exercise again, and when you feel that you've got an SOP that is solid, then declare yourself as an operational capability. Recently, we brought in NGOs, the Red Cross, St. John's Ambulance. In terms of critical infrastructure, there's a huge interest from many utilities, the nuclear power utilities in particular. Bruce Nuclear is launching one of the largest exercises I think we've ever had in Canada. This is just in the province of Ontario. Over 200 agencies are participating in a scenario where I think they're using a tornado incident affecting operations in the nuclear plant. And MESAS will actually be used as the exercise inject tool. So rather than sending these little pieces of paper around saying this happened, that happened, populate it onto MESAS, put the content there that you would normally see. And this has been a great catalyst for getting agencies to come on board. So the webinars and online training of MESAS have been going literally wild in the last few weeks as we prepare for this exercise in August. In October of last year, we assigned an agreement for the FEMA link into MESAS. This is the developmental hubs. The operational hubs are literally a couple months away. They appear on the national plan, and public safety have been meeting with their counterparts in the U.S. To do that signing. In fact, if anyone's going to the CAP conference in Montreal, I think there'll be a demonstration of the FEMA IPOS link into MESAS on the third day. I think it's the 3rd of May. So today we're actually actively expanding the richness of information feeds that go into MESIS. The general idea being the more content we can provide, the greater the pull to have Canadian public safety stakeholders participate. The greater the number of agency counts, the lower the cost per account. And as I mentioned, we're looking at a not-for-profit model, and we're trying to do the math to say, well, how much will the feds fund? We're providing a huge advantage to major departments like Environment Canada, Natural Resources Canada, that have been struggling to find ways to get their information into the hands of decision makers. So I'm saying they ought to pay a little bit at least, right? And then leave the rest for the poorer responder agencies. The back of the envelope calculations right now are showing that we're probably looking at about a $500 a year subscription fee for your typical agency. And what we'll probably do is the number of accounts that you have. So if you have an account for fire, EMS, and police, you pay three prices. And if you have a city the size of Toronto, Vancouver, you may be able to afford 50 licenses. Town of Sarnia, 1 license. So the cost will be scalable based on the complexity of your operation. Some of the examples of the feeds that we've been putting in: stream level sensors in New Brunswick are automatically feeding in. Radiation sensors from the Radiation Protection Bureau are being looked at. Probably the most popular overall continues to be road closures, and we are in discussion with Telenium, who is now going to be providing feeds directly from the Telenium Road Status Service. These are the guys that tell you the status of roads during a winter storm and whatnot. I think there are 4 provinces that use that system, and the company couldn't be happier. They're already contracted to provide the feeds. They're going to continue to provide it on the websites, but having the MESIS feed now suddenly opens a much larger stakeholder group to looking at what they have. The Environment Canada, another interesting observation, Environment Canada has a product that's designed for first responders and emergency managers that's not shared with the public. It's actually a long-range forecast that they're not prepared to risk sharing with the public because of the uncertainty factor. And they've been trying to find a way to provide it. And what we're looking at is feeding it into MESIS and designing a simple slide button on the bottom of the screen so you can scroll forward and look 3-4 weeks into the future and look at what some of these weather forecasts are showing. And we've got a development project looking at that. Very recently, we've, as you've probably heard with the recent concern over solar flares, has been an interest in automating the solar flare alerts. I get a message every day from the solar lab that says, all's quiet, all's quiet. I tend to just automatically delete it. So what we're working is putting the solar flares into the MESIS system, feeding information directly off the website, which is updated every 15 minutes, and looking at CAP, and we've just gone through the workshop literally 2 weeks ago, looking at the thresholds that are required to scale to the various levels on a CAP message. So we required that we sat down with our solar experts and identified the thresholds which warrant notifying emergency managers, and we mapped the alert system into CAP accordingly. It worked absolutely seamlessly and is about to go operational. It's now being done manually. It will soon be automated. What we had to come up with, and with the solar lab's help, we were able to identify 3 regions of Canada that they can target a solar flare alert: the polar region, the auroral, and the subaurora. And so when you click on the solar alert, you'll be able to identify the extent of risk to those regions. What was really fascinating was when we started to put some of these flares out, we found